Okay, so last week I encouraged you to look up the Ten Commandments and to read them. If you did, and even when you do, you're going to see that five of them have to do with how we deal with other people and how we live with each other. And that's what Jesus is doing here in his continuation in his Sermon on the Mount. I'm going to read to you three passages, still in Matthew, and this is going to show you how God wants us to be with other people. So here we go. You have heard it said from long ago that you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who curses their brother or sister is answerable to the court, and anyone who curses their brother or sister will be in danger of fire and hell. Next passage. You have heard it said, eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2. Give to the one who asks, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. Third passage. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain to the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet one another, even though your own people, what are you doing more than others? Don't the pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your Father in heaven is perfect. So what Jesus is saying here is that when you're going to get angry with somebody, it's inevitable, it's going to happen. And being angry with somebody and having an argument with somebody is one thing. But when you get into the hateful language, when you get into the hurting, when you get into the personal, and making that other person feel bad and sorry for themselves and things like that, when you get hateful, you're killing them. That's what Jesus is saying. He's saying you just might as well kill them, because in my eyes, you are. So you need to be careful with that, and you need to be careful with your anger. The other one that he's talking about here is loving your enemies as well. Is when somebody attacks you, turning the other cheek. What Jesus is saying here is that when somebody hits you, somebody causes you pain, somebody emotionally, physically, whatever it is, don't return evil for evil. Don't return anger for anger. You've heard it said, two wrongs don't make a right. Well, think about it. If you've got one person hitting you or insulting you or causing you emotional pain, and you do it back to them, how is that any good? You need to step away from that. You need to walk away. You need to let them be like that. Jesus is saying, don't you be like that, especially if you want to be God's child. You cannot do that. The next thing he's talking about is loving your enemies as you love your neighbors. And he brings up a couple of examples here. Tax collectors, they were looked at as a bad sort in those days. The pagans, they're anti-God. They had other religions, evil religions, and they still exist today. But both groups, they greet each other, they hang out with each other, they share with each other, they do things with each other, and they're evil and they're doing it. And if you do it just with your people that you consider good or you consider your people, what good is it? You're no different than they are. Jesus is telling you he wants you to be that way with both. So you have the person that you know is a God-fearing person, and you're nice to them, and you're comforting to them, and you're welcoming to them. But yet the person that is not a child of God, and he is anti-God for that matter, you shun away from him. You look at them as they're different. Well, the passage says here that God causes the sun to shine on both of you. He causes the rain to fall on both of you, which means there is no difference between you and them. This is what God wants you to understand. This is what Jesus is saying. If you want to be in heaven, if you want to be with me, if you want to be called God's child, you must accept others as you would accept yourself. Because God accepts you when you come to him, and God is going to accept that person when that person comes to him. We are no different than anybody else until we confess and accept God's gift of salvation. That's when we become his child. That's when we become different from them. And when we are different from them, we must realize that they have the same opportunity that we had and that we are given. That's why we need to accept them and show God's love for them through us. Next week, I'll probably give a couple of more examples of how we're supposed to get along with each other. And then the week after that, we're going to get into how to pray. And I'm looking forward to that one. So have a great week.